Right, so I would kindly like to welcome Salwa. Salwa is an application security engineer at Microsoft India, and it's his first time to Australia. So I'm very, very happy to welcome him to Australia. So let's give him a very warm Australian welcome, guys.
Yeah, good morning everyone. So today we are going to see broken authentication and authorization. So I'll show you how to access any application without authorization and how to bypass the authentication mechanism. So this is a bit about me. I work for Microsoft as an application security engineer in India, and I had done a lot of bug bounty participation back. And then these are my contact details for if you want to contact with me. Then this is the agenda. So first of all, we'll see the basics of authentication. So what is authentication, how it works. Then we'll see the authorization or privileges. Then I'll show you the different vulnerabilities of authentication bypass and authorization bypasses. So all the vulnerabilities explained here will be the vulnerabilities I reported to various bug bounty programs and which were accepted and then fixed. And then I'll show remediation and the QA session. So what is actually authentication? So it is the identity of any individual. So here everyone, we have a badges or passes to enter into the conference. So that is nothing but which identifies you, who are you, and what you have a valid identity to enter into the conference halls and access the different sessions, right? So if anyone can access the conferences and get into this conference hall without having the pass, that is nothing but the authentication bypass. And then coming to authorization, this is what you can do. Once you are authenticated to any system or application, what are the different roles you have or what you can perform in this application, that is nothing but the authorization you have. So here, for example, in this conference, we have multiple kind of users, like few are the staff or the organizing committee members. Then comes the delegates or attendees. Then comes the speakers. So everyone has different roles. So as normally speaking, the staffs have the administrative privileges, so they can do whatever full access to the conferences. Then comes the speakers who can also go to other conferences, see the talks, and also they are allowed to give a talk. And the delegates have the least privilege. They are normal users. They can come and attend different sessions, and just they cannot do anything like administrative things, right? So anyone, if a delegate after coming into the conference, if they can do something which they are not allowed to do, they act like a speaker or they act like a staff member, then it is nothing but authorization bypass or privilege escalation. Then we will see the different case studies. So the first one is very my favorite one because it gave me a lot of bounty back in time when I reported it. So it is like misuse of auth tokens. So if you see in any application, there are authentication tokens which are used to authenticate a user and throughout the session. So in that scenario, you can check for such vulnerabilities. Okay. So first thing, the application worked like this. So this was the user interface or login page, and then there was a backend authentication server, and there were the other web servers and databases separate. So there were two scenarios. So when a user gives the valid credentials, so login status was success, and the authentication server returns a auth token to the response, and then it is forwarded to the web server. The authentication token was validated. If valid token, the user was given access to the web application. If second scenario, if wrong credential was given, the login status was failed and the blank authentication token. The authentication token parameter had blank, nothing in that, null. So now comes the attack scenario, how I did the attack. So I was just looking into using Burp Suite, which is nothing but a proxy tool. So using this, we can see the requests and responses so that we can do some modifications, and what actually going behind the requests, we can monitor using Burp Suite or any proxy tool. So using that, the attack scenario was first, the attacker who himself was a valid user for the application. So he submits his valid credentials, and as per the diagram before, you can see that he gets the valid authentication token as he was a valid user, right? So now what he does is he submits his valid user credentials, intercepts the first login response coming from the authentication server, and then he copies his authentication token. and then drops the response, so that the next request going to the web server is dropped. So the web server doesn't know that there was a valid authentication token generated by the authentication server. Then what he does next, he sends a login request to the application with target user ID. Target user ID is nothing but victim. So suppose you are the target victim, I am the attacker. So what I do is I just know your user ID, I don't know your credentials. What I do, I just send your user ID and any random wrong password to the server. So as per the design, the application returns false in that scenario and a blank authentication token, right? And what I do is I already copied in the my authentication token, the attacker's authentication token. That what I do, in your victim's response, I make login status as success and copies my authentication token in your response and send it to the 302 request to the web server. Now what happens, this was the configuration error. So the application was failing to map between the user ID and the authentication token. So what it was doing, it was just checking the authentication token if it was valid or not, and then from the request it was picking the user ID and giving access. So now what, as an attacker, what I did, I attached my authentication token with your user ID and sent a valid request to the server. And server sends a check of the authentication token with the authentication server, finds that the authentication token is valid. It doesn't know that whether I was the initial user to create the authentication token. It just validates the authentication token, maps with me and gives me access. So what I got access to the victim's account. So that means the any user's account. So in this scenario, I need not know the credential of the user. I can take account takeover to any of the users if I know the user ID. So after I reported this, initially it took a bit of time to them to understand that, because they were telling authentication token is there, how would you guess the authentication token? So I need not guess, I would generate my own authentication token and attach it with any victim user, right? So later it was fixed. They have mapped the user ID and authentication token matching, and I was given a huge amount of bounty. So it was my favorite, one of the favorite bounty vulnerabilities. Then after this, cookie manipulation. So in this second scenario, many of the applications, if you see using any cookie manager tools, add-ons in Mozilla or Chrome, so you can see that cookie contains some user IDs or some kind of session tokens, right? And using that, after post authentication, the user session is maintained. So in this scenario, I have identified that on successful login of any user, the cookie contains session cookie, which is nothing but a user ID of numeric value. Suppose 1, 2, 3, 4 or something, 5-digit or 6-digit numeric characters. So what I was doing, I was just changing the values randomly and trying to see what happens next. So this was the cookie manager add-on of Firefox. You can play around with it. So attacker logs in. So as an attacker, I logged into my own user account in the application. Then using the cookie editor, I could see the user tokens, user IDs saved in the cookie. I just edited it to some random numbers and refreshed the browser page. And then I got access to a random victim's account. So finally I found out that it was a like high privilege manager kind of role. So I reported it, and they have then mapped it. So session token should not contain any user identifier or something fixed value, so that using that any attacker can get access to other users. So it should be mapped in a proper way that any user logged in, they should not be able to change the cookie values to get access to some sessions. Then session invalidation. So you can see like .NET or Java, they have like default session invalidation timeout. Like for .NET it is 20 minutes. So after 20 minutes of time, the session gets invalidated for any active sessions. So in this scenario, I found out that once logged in, the application allowed multiple login. So from various like any social media, you can connect from your handheld devices like mobiles, tablets, and also at the same time you can connect from your laptops or systems, right? So similarly, this application was allowing that multi-login. Apart from that, the session was not expired even after a password reset. So suppose you are logged into multiple devices and you change the password in one system, the other sessions doesn't expire. They all keeps logged in. So this was the scenario I found out and I reported initially. And the application owners, they did not accept that. They said like, okay, even if it was like a session was not being invalidated in other devices, the user only has logged in, and once in a lifetime he would log out. That time will expire that. That thing is properly mentioned. Like if they click log out, the sessions got invalidated. But if they reset the password, the sessions are still active. So I was thinking like what I can do now. I was thinking. I was not able to I was not able to give any proof of my bug. So how it is a like critical issue. Then after 3 months of time, I was keep tracking that session ID, whether it was expired or not. So it was not expired. Then I sent them a mail saying the actual attack scenario. So suppose an user has found out that his accounts got compromised. Now what is the remediation for account compromise? You just change your passwords, right? You get notification email from the service provider that your accounts have been hijacked or something. You can change your password, which will protect you. So even though he changes his password from his device, if a attacker already logged in from another system, that session doesn't get invalidated. So attacker still holds of the active session, right? And he can do everything what this legitimate user is able to do. And there is no way of invalidating other sessions. The user doesn't know that whether the another active sessions are there. Most of the famous applications you can see in the web applications or mobile applications, there will be some button or some feature. So you can invalidate all the other active logged in sessions, right? You might have seen that. But in this application, it was not there. So even after a account compromise, even though password is changed by the user, there is no way that he can invalidate other sessions from any other devices where his account was logged in or compromised. So after stating all this stuff, after reporting 3 months, the owners of the application, they took it seriously, and then they started mitigating this, and they incorporated a new feature of invalidating all the other sessions if from any handheld device or any system where the current user is logged in, he have the option now to invalidate other active sessions using OTP. So they have also introduced multi-factor authentication there. So next one is the forgot password feature. So if you forget your password, what happens? You go to the forgot password link, click there, you give your account recovery options or your registered email ID or mobile number. Then a OTP comes to your mobile device or recovery option, or a password reset link comes to your email ID, right? This is the normal general flow of forgot password feature. So in this scenario, the thing first, Happy flow is perfectly fine. Like whatever registered email ID or mobile number the user has registered, when he clicks on forgot password, the OTP goes to him and he can directly log into his email or mobile and then reset his password. This was his general flow. But using any proxy tool, you can also see the request and responses, right? That's what I did. So when you try to change your password or forgot password feature, this is what it looks like. So in the second page, when you are asked to text, email or call, part of the like forgot password option is masked. So whether it is email ID or it is mobile number, it will be masked. So there is no option to edit that or change that. But using a proxy tool, I can change that number. So when I click on text or send mail or call, I see that in the request, the forgot password option given like email ID or mobile number, it was going in that parameter. So I could tamper with that. I could change that email ID or mobile number and then forward the request. Now what the application thinks? The application already has validated you are a valid user, but forgot password option was given by attacker. So the OTP goes to the attacker's system, email or mobile, and then he can use that OTP and log into the victim's account. So in this one, so they were managing the forgot password options on the client side itself just by masking them. So it is no whenever you are doing any forgot password features or such functionalities, don't mask on the client side. It should never be exposed in the client side. There should be a token or matching identifier on the client side. So for example, you have both email ID and mobile as a forgot password options. So there can be identifier like one is email ID, two is mobile number. So once you submit as email, the server should send email to the server's database, forgot password option saved there, not from the client side. In this scenario, it was taking from the client side itself and sending the OTP. That was the hole here. So after reporting, they have like come up with proper mitigation techniques and it was fixed. So in your application or wherever you are seeing such kind of scenarios, just look into the request using any proxy tool. If there is like the OTP or the forgot password emails or mobile numbers are going as plain text in the request. If it is there, try to give your any random number and see whether OTP goes to that number or the actually registered number. By that you can verify whether this vulnerability is there or not. Then this mobile app. So it was a banking app, wallet app. So on successful login, the user session was created on the server and then that was stored in the, it was Android app, so app data and the folder name, app name or whatever app name was given. Inside that there was a SQLite browser which contains the session ID. So only after successful login, the session ID was created and stored in the mobile app data. If it was unsuccessful login attempt, there was no session. This is happy flow, okay, as per the design. Now what I did, I took a rooted device, Android device, a SQLite browser and ADB shell to run commands on that rooted device. Then first thing I did, after login to any user, I extracted the SQLite DB from the Android device to my local system and then I opened it using the SQLite browser and checked the session ID, how it looks like. And it was nothing but a base64 encoded string. So I used my Bob suite to decode it. So after decoding once, I did not find anything. So I kept decoding it. After decoding 3 times, I identified that this is nothing but the username in this format, like flower braces, then square brackets inside that username. And this string was 3 times base64 encoded and made as the session. So now what you could do, you could just log into your own wallet, mobile wallet, banking wallet using your credentials. So you know what is your username and then extract the ADB, using ADB shell, extract the SQLite DB, check the username, take any random user's username, do the same thing 3 times encoding, push it back to the database, restart your Android device and open that app, mobile app. So what it does, now it sends the request. Once it is opened, it sends first request to the server that this is the session ID, please give me the access to the wallet. The server thinks, okay, this is the session identifier, that means the application is already logged in the Android device, right? Because without logging in, there should not be any session identifier. So the request contains session identifier means server thinks authentication is already taken care of. Now what it does, it just 3 times decode the session identifier and gives you access. So this, in the attack scenario, the attacker has taken any user, random user's username, encoded it and pushed into the database. So he can now get access to the bank account or wallet of the victim. So after this, what is the remediation for this? Any banking application or mobile applications, they should not contain such identifiers in the local storage. And it should not be only one-time authentication check. For any request, each consecutive request, because in mobile devices, you cannot like check the integrity of anything, whether it is changed, modified or tempered or not. So in the server side, they have to keep track of the each incoming request from the mobile devices, like whether this is an active session or not. Just not by looking into the one identifier. They have to also keep session on the server side and mapping with the user so that such kind of attacks can be remediated. So for pen testers or anyone who is having mobile application for your solutions, you can just check for such similar things, whether the it's an Android app or iOS app or any kind of mobile applications. Is there any session identifiers or something stored on the device's local storage? So if it is there, single identifier, then it should be not like that. You have to check the validity or integrity of the sessions on the server side. Then this is the another mobile application. So in this transaction was included. So this contains multiple web service calls. So I'll just explain one by one. You try to take it. First call, when you open the application, give user ID and registered mobile number. So it sends the OTP to the registered mobile number. Okay. So what it was doing, it was a mobile wallet where you can log into your account and then you can send money to some other account. Suppose you are sending money to your friends, so you have to just give his mobile number, so the amount from your account gets deducted and deposited to the friend's account, right? So what you have to do, first user ID and registered mobile number, so OTP got sent to your registered number. Then in the second call, recipient's mobile number, that is nothing but your friend's mobile number whom you are trying to send the money, and the OTP received in the first request, right? So after giving the OTP and amount, the money transfer gets successful. Okay. Now the other scenarios, when you give user ID, your valid user ID, but a wrong mobile number, you get proper error message. Like this is not a valid transaction, you cannot proceed. Suppose the first thing is done properly, but in the second thing you give proper recipient number of your friend and wrong OTP number. So this was a 4-digit OTP. So if you give the wrong OTP, again transaction gets unsuccessful and you get proper error message like OTP is not proper, it is a wrong OTP. Correct? This is what happens in all the mobile wallet or any bank transactions. So now what happened was, again I was intercepting using the burp suite and I was checking how it was going on. So when I gave user ID and wrong mobile number, I checked the response in burp suite, so I can see all the responses, tags, whatever coming back to the mobile app. So mobile app has very limited views, right? It will not show you proper like full like web applications. How we see web application, it is fully designed and full detailed messages. In mobile application, it was not like that. It was just showing on the GUI, it was showing transaction failed. But when I see the burp suite response, I see that it contains another error message which was commented on the response and which contains the registered mobile number. So it says all this happened, root cause of this was because the debugging was enabled in that mobile app. They just went to production and they forgot to turn off the debugging. So even though the response contained debugging error messages. So I got the first error message like when I give wrong mobile number, in the error message I get the actual mobile number. It says this is the wrong mobile number, actual mobile number is this. So I got the mobile number. Now what I did, I initiated a valid OTP request and I got the mobile number, right? So the OTP gets sent to the victim's mobile. So in the first error message I got, suppose I'll put it this way, you are the victim, I am the attacker. So I don't know your mobile number. So what I do is, I know your user ID. I gave your user ID in the login page. I gave any random mobile number. In the first error, I got to know your mobile number. Now I initiate another request with your mobile number and user ID. So an OTP got generated, but that OTP is not with me. It went to your mobile, right? Not to me. Now I generate the second call where I give recipient user whom transfer has to be made and a wrong OTP and with this symbol. So now I get error message that what is the actual OTP which was sent to you, the victim. Now I got your user ID, your mobile number and your OTP from the error messages. I initiate a new request. I have everything. I give your user ID, your mobile number, your OTP and then recipient my number. So money got deducted from your wallet and I received the amount. And when everything was happening, you received the message because your mobile is registered with the mobile banking app, but you can't do anything because in this short period of time, you cannot block your account. You cannot stop the transaction because you just have OTP, but I also have the OTP from the error message. So I already initiated the transaction, which is successful. So you again got another message that your account was debited with this amount. So you have no idea what was going on and who was doing it remotely. And after this, what would be your situation? This would be your, this would be your situation. You can't do anything. You will just die, fall off and die, and you don't know what to do. You can't contact the bank also. They would tell it was your mobile only. OTP was sent to you. We don't know anything. Initially, it was like that. So after this, all the analysis, they got to know that because of the debugging was enabled, this was happening. The error messages was revealing the actual mobile number as well as OTP, which was used in the testing phase for the developers to see whether OTPs and mobile numbers are working fine or not. So then they turned off the debugging. And for your information, any application, irrespective of web, mobile, or any kind of TIC client, any debugging should not be enabled in productions. So debugging error messages reveals lot of data or sensitive information from the servers to the attackers, which they use to target your attack, or they may initiate some other vulnerability or find some other targeted attack to your servers or to your application, right? So turn off the debugging for any production applications. So now we are moving to the privilege escalation or authorization bypasses. So you can see, first of all, true or false. So Boolean based privileges. So few applications have only two kinds of user. One is admin user and one is normal user. So how they track the user roles? One is setting a predefined role like is admin or something, an identifier. Set it to true if it is admin. Set it to false if it is normal user. This is the general flow. In this application, it was like my second bug bounty submission, and it took like around 2 weeks to get it resolved. So initially what happened, the application, after logging in as a normal user, I was checking the responses and I saw that there is an identifier called isAdmin which was set to false. So I thought, like, if I change it to true, what happens? Usually any pen testers or security researchers, they concentrate on the request, right? Editing requests, sending it to the servers and check the responses, what is the changes or what they get as result. In this scenario, I edited the response. So in the response, when first response was coming, isAdmin was set to false. I just changed it to true. And then I see that the portal which I was logged in before as a normal user, I did not have many features and many tabs. But as soon as I turned it to true, the isAdmin parameter, I was able to see all those hidden features, tabs, everything. So that means they were just checking that isAdmin true or false. They were not properly maintaining the access control, whether I am a user or admin. They were not checking that. They were just depending on the isAdmin parameter and giving you access. So based on that, after I'll just give you the scenario how it happened. So initial communication I reported. So the vulnerability program manager, he did not believe me. He thought like I was doing with a admin account. So he created a separate user account, like normal privilege user account. He sent me the link and told, okay, can you do now? Like whatever you did with your account, now change my account. I'll give you credential. This is a normal low privilege user. Log in and make it admin. So what I did the same thing. I just logged into his account. I made it isAdmin equal to true, and I got the all admin features. I took snapshot and sent to him. So as soon as I sent, within like 2 minutes, he accepted it, and even surprisingly, he fixed it also in no time. So anything like this, if your application has only two users, kind of users like admin or normal, you implement proper access control mechanism and role check. Don't just based on the one parameter, don't give accesses. So now this is another privilege escalation scenario in which there are multiple users in the application. So in the first scenario, only two users, admin and normal. In this, there are multiple users. So it may vary from like admins, viewers, writers, contributors, like that. If you can see any CRM applications, it's like that. So some will be readers, some will be writers, some has contributors, some are administrators, some are super admins. So how to maintain the different roles in such kind of applications is, it can either have like this integer 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that, based on 0 is super admin, 1 is admin, 2 is contributor, like that. Or there will be some constant strings like role equal to manager, role equal to admin, role equal to user. So, and in this specific application, all these roles were stored in cookies. So this was the entry point for me to find out the vulnerability. So I checked, I had different kind of users in the application registered, and then I was checking how it was maintaining the roles. I found out it was stored in the cookies. So now using again the cookie manipulation, any add-ons or tools, you can just change the role. So changing the role, if I was a normal like viewer, if I change the role to admin and refresh the page, I was able to perform the admin's functionalities. So this was the vulnerability. Okay. So similar attacks. Next, I'll explain another attack as a similar case. So in this one, this application had different user, like people manager who was having role 1. So he could create or edit other users' details. Okay. Other users had view only role, which is role 2. So only the super admins who is role 0 they can change the role of other users as well as delete users. People manager can only create and edit, he cannot delete, but super admins can delete as well. So this was the normal application logic. The attack scenario was, while creating a new user, people manager can use the proxy tool Bubsuit, which is like most of the pen testers use. So he used the proxy tool Bubsuit, and then he create users and see the role parameter. So usually while creating role, he can only create with 2 without any interception, but now he can change the role value to 0. So he created a new super admin user, which he was not allowed to. He was just allowed to create a view only user, but using proxy tool, he can change the role and create a new super admin. Now, as he has created the super admin, he knows the credentials of the new user. He logs into the system now as a super admin. So he escalated his privilege from people manager to super admin by creating a new user. This was one scenario. Second scenario was, while editing other users' detail, people manager can replace the user ID with his own. So initially by design, user is not allowed to edit his own details. Only super admins can do. So he can edit other users' role who have very low privileges. So now what he can do, people manager, while editing a view only user's role, he changes the user ID to his own user ID. That means it opens up his own edit page, edit user page. In that, he adds a role parameter separately in the proxy tool and gives a value to 0. So what happens here? Here he directly becomes the super admin. In first scenario, he is creating a new super admin user and then logging into that, he gets admin privileges. In second scenario, while editing other users' details, he edits himself and adds administrative privileges to himself. So in this case, at least if there is a like logging mechanism, the application owners may know that there is a new users created with admin privileges. But in this scenario, there is no logging because here is no state change. He is just editing his own details. So there was no logging. So in first scenario, there was a kind of logging which can be prevented, or looking at the log, they can understand a new user is created, stop the user. But in second scenario, a people manager edits his own role and makes him admin. So there is no way of tracing this. So for your any applications like that which has multiple user roles and multiple users dealing with, you have to just see how the role management and what are the different business logics like for edit, delete or view users. So you can check how to prevent these things and assign proper roles. Then this one is GUI based. So most of the applications, what they do is, for low privilege users, they just blur out or disable some buttons in the GUI, UI. And for admins and all, these buttons will be enabled. So it is very easy to do using any developer's toolbar, or if you press F12 from your browser, it opens the developer toolbar. There you can go. And one second. Yeah. Once you open the developer toolbar, you can just remove the disabled attributes from the HTML elements, and these buttons get enabled. Click on that and perform your actions. Again, this is only client-side validation of making some user roles, so you should never do like that. Then this is the high privilege, like IDOR. Using IDOR, you can access high privileged pages, functions which are not given to the normal user. So in this, you can use any proxy tool, or you can directly guess the URLs and try to access which are not given to you. So for example, you are logged in as a normal user, you don't have the edit page or edit feature or functionality, you have just view. So you can just change the URL to like delete user.aspx or delete user.jsp and see what happens. And while doing any action like viewing any details of a user, you can use interception proxy tool and change the method name from view to delete and see what happens. So it may delete the user, then you have got the vulnerability. Then comes this spam email. So in this application, it was like campaign application, which was used to the admins and users to send campaign emails to any other users. So normal user can send campaign emails to only to members of his group, and admin user is allowed to send to different groups. But using proxy tool, a normal user can log in and he can see the recipient email ID parameter and also the sender parameter. He could modify those two. He can send to any random people on earth the campaign mails, and also on behalf of anyone. He can impersonate any user like abc@gmail.com, and the mail goes to the victim as abc.com. So the victim thinks like it is coming from another person, where the attacker is different. So in such impersonating, you have to also check for anything going mails or any such kind of things. It should not be on the user side. It has to be linked on the server side. Request goes to server, and then it has to be checking whether this user belongs to this group or not, and who he is intended to send the messages. So I am wrapping it because of time constraints. So I'll be little faster, please. Corporate. Then this deleting project ID by IDOT. This is in HackerOne. It is publicly disclosed. I'll share the videos as well and the link where you can go and see how I did that. So in this scenario, what happened was the application was InVision. You might be knowing about the InVision app, right? So it had a normal user who is not owner of the project. He can just see the project. There is no delete option for those kind of projects. But the same user can be admin for other projects, right? I am a user. I can be a user for one project, admin for another project. I have two projects. So for this user project, I can't see any delete option. But project which I am admin, I can see the delete option. So here, using the proxy tool, first I click on my admin project and see how the delete operation looks. Then I go to the user project, click on the project, copy the project ID from URL, come back, go to my project, click on delete, intercept the request, change the project ID with that of that project which I am not admin. Now what happens? Request goes to the server with the project ID of that project which I am not admin, and that project gets deleted. Even though the delete option was not there in GUI, because I copied the project ID and sent the delete request, it got deleted. So in this scenario, it is called IDOR, like insecure direct object references. It is referencing any object pages with a fixed identifier. It should not be like that. For any deleting operation or something, state change operation, there has to be proper check whether the user is allowed to do the delete operation on this specific object or not. Then only the delete operation should be accepted. Then it was reported back to the InVision team through HackerOne, and they fixed it and they rewarded. So you can, I'll share the PPT and the videos in that link. You can go to the video and see. Because I don't have time to play the video now, you can go and see the video there. It is self-explanatory. Then coming to the next one. So in this application, it was Trello. It is also a HackerOne program. So in this application, a low privilege user was only allowed to see the project members of this team. He was not allowed to add any new members to the team. So using this code snippet, so it was just submitting back to the root element, and it creates a button which tells add member. So a low privilege user logs into his account, go to the view users page. There is no button for adding a user. He just adds this one, and then clicks on add button and adds a new user, and which has admin privileges. Again, this one has the video. You can go through and see. So after reporting this, they have just removed this button. It was removed. They have just disabled that any low privilege user should not create or add any HTML content on the pages. So remediation, I'll quickly go through. So for any authentication related thing, auth tokens and user ID should be always mapped. Then there should not be any guessable user identifier in cookie. Session invalidation, as you have gone through. Then strong password reset functionality. There should not be any like client side manipulation of the password reset options. Then response body should not contain any error message, and debugging should be disabled for production apps. Then any app data for mobile apps should not contain any sensitive user identifier or any sensitive details. Then for authorization bypass remediation is map the user ID with the session and roles. So who is the user, what is his role, it should be mapped with the session. There should not be any role manipulation in the client side, and they should not allow the user to access some high privilege functions or features. Then GUI based client side privilege, like disabling some element or blocking some element or removing some element from GUI, it should not be done like that. There has to be proper mapping of the user, what functions he can access and what pages he can access. Then access control mechanism. You should never use IDOR. You should like randomly generate the resource names or resource paths and then pass it to the users. Then always do server-side validation and business logic validation for any business scenarios when there are multiple users, multiple roles assigned. So you should see the business logic, different ways possible, how to access the pages, what are the different functionalities a user can do, try to exploit those, try to test those before going to production. So incorporate security in the early phase of SDLC. Then if you have any questions or any suggestions to me, you can just write to me, and the slides are here. So you can just note it down, where you can get the video links as well. So you can just play the video and see how it worked, and it has full self-explanatory explanations. And thank you, Osad, for giving me the opportunity to come here and talk before you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Salwa. So looking at the mobile app, there weren't any questions submitted. So maybe my computer's broken or something like that. But if there are any questions on the floor, can someone just raise a hand? No? I have a question. How long did it take you to find all these bugs? Because there were about 7 bugs, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like from start to finish, how long did the whole process take you?
So like I was doing bug bounty in 2015 and 16. So I was doing actively, and like around 1 hour or daily I was spending 1 hour, 2 hours on a specific application. So how it works in bug bounty platforms, there are private bug bounties and public bug bounties. So I used to participate in private bug bounties, where like few researchers are handpicked and the test credentials, everything was given. So I was in that time frame, I was trying to find the vulnerabilities and submit to them. And after submission, few applications are very quick in response. Within like minutes, they fixed it. And few took some time, like 1 month or 2 months. They had standard disclosure policies, and also they had like fixed policies. So within submission, 1 month or 2 months, they used to fix. And then they again send back to me to validate whether it is fixed or not. So it is like
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Salwa.